Today's video does contain subject matter that some viewers may find disturbing, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And thank you. When I used to work at a small convenience store and gas station, we would get a lot of weirdos that would come in, and even though some of the customers were less than desirable, we also had some fairly normal interactions. It really felt like we dealt more with the weird people than the normal ones, but after a while, you just get used to it. And the weird becomes the norm. Anyone that has worked retail will 100% understand what I just said. Anyways, because we were in an area that was mostly surrounded by homes and a lot of neighborhoods, we had a corkboard at the entrance of the store where people could post what was essentially their ads. For the most part, people would pin up their business cards for things like lawn mowing and legal services, but we would also occasionally get flyers for nearby concerts, or people wanting to fix others' computers. Things like that. It was basically our own little contained corkboard next door or Craigslist. The only requirement that we had with the board was that they had to have the manager's approval before they posted anything. So, when they came in to post something, we had to put it in the back office for the manager to hang up. It was, more than anything, a quality control process, so that we didn't get dumb things that had zero benefit to the community posted on the regular. This story is actually about one of the things that someone wanted posted to the board. I was working a shift and this older guy in a nice dress shirt came into the store. Nothing weird there. We would get a lot of people that came in just after work to get a drink or something. However, this guy came up to the counter with the flyer and asked me if he was allowed to hang it on the board. I mentioned to him that I'd have to run it by the manager, and that he came in first thing in the morning, but I could take the flyer and put it on his desk so he could approve it right away. He agreed, and he handed me the flyer. It was basically a missing persons poster. There was a picture of a guy in the center, and he was well dressed, and this image almost looked like a headshot for a business. The information was a bit strange. It had his height, weight, blood type, and a number of other things, but there was no name for the man. There was a small blurb that mentioned, "If you see this man, call this number," with what I'm assuming was the man's phone number, and then there was mentions of a substantial monetary reward if he was found. Because I'm nosy, I asked if he was a missing person. The man laughed slightly and said, "Well, kind of." I asked how someone could kind of be missing, and he responded with, "We know that he's around somewhere, but we don't know where. He walked out on a job and we need to find him so we can go over his exit interview." I thought that was a weird thing to say, but I just kind of accepted it and told him I would give it to my manager to post. The guy thanked me and left, and that was the end of that. Until a few days later. The manager posted the flyer as requested. It was posted front and center on the board since it seemed important. Then, about 3 days after it was posted, a guy came into the store to buy some beer, and I know that I awkwardly stared at him for a few moments, because I was trying to place him. But then, I realized that he was the guy on the poster. He noticed that I was staring because he was giving me this weird look like he was uncomfortable. I mentioned to him that someone was looking for him, and I motioned towards the board. As soon as I said someone was looking for him, he went pale as a ghost. He walked over to the flyer and pulled it off, and then came back up to me and asked me if I knew who had posted it. I described the guy. Older man, military haircut. It was gray. He was nicely dressed, had large rimmed glasses. Basically everything that I could remember. I then mentioned that he had told me that he needed to do an exit interview, whatever that meant. As soon as I said that, he started yelling expletives about how screwed he was. He then looked at me and said, "Look, I wasn't here. Please do not tell anyone that I was ever here." And he then ran out of the store, jumped in his car, and sped away without his beer. I was so confused. I had no idea what the hell all of that was, but this guy obviously did not want to be found by the first guy. What's weird? I had never heard another thing about this. Neither man came into the store after this. I never saw anything about it on the news or anything, and I never saw his face in any other missing persons listing. I personally do see a few possibilities about this situation. This could have been a prank. Both men could have been in on it, but something about the other guy's face makes me think it was serious. Either that or he was a top-tier actor. When he went pale, he seriously looked like his heart had stopped for a moment, or like he was about to puke. Alternatively, if this was a real situation, the men that were looking for him were not good men, and he had pissed them off somehow, and being found potentially would not have been a good thing for him. Either way, I kind of hope that he was able to get away, and he made it out okay, because I feel like if whoever wanted to do that exit interview caught him, he's probably not around anymore. This happened a few years back when I had to stop at a gas station after work to fill up my tank. For a bit of context, I live in a small town that has had a bit of a boom as far as people living here, which is nice, because we've gotten a few new convenience stores and such, but at the same time, this expansion has brought in some questionable people. For the most part, they were probably harmless, but some of them were the kind of people that you try to ignore when you're walking around town, if that makes sense. The type that will be talking to a wall and then turn to look at you and start yelling at you about how they need your help to do whatever. I don't like to judge people, I really don't, but sometimes that first impression can really make an impact and scare you more than anything. As mentioned, I was leaving work, and as I pulled out of the lot, I noticed that my gas light had actually come on, which meant that I had two options: stop at the gas station a block away from my work, or risk it and head home and go to the station where I live. The gas station by my work was not the best, and it frequently had the aforementioned people that would hang around it, but heading home could potentially end with me running out of gas most of the way there, and then I would have to figure that out. In the end, I decided that I would just make it a quick trip to the station by my work, would put in a couple of dollars just to guarantee that I could make it home, and fill up at the better station. The less time I spent at the questionable one, the better. So, I head out, drive down the way, and pull into the station. Much to my surprise, the lot was empty. I was actually happy to see this because that meant that I could probably fill my tank there and be okay, and not have to worry about going anywhere else. I get out and I go to swipe my card, and to my surprise, the reader keeps declining it. But the error it kept throwing was basically indicating that it was the reader and not my card. I give up and just head in to prepay for $20 of gas. I tell the attendant that the reader doesn't seem to be working, and he just kind of shrugs it off like, yeah, whatever. I prepay, and as soon as I walk out, I notice another car pull up to the pump right behind mine. The station only had 2 pumps, with nozzles on each side, so no matter where you parked to fill up, you were going to be within 10 feet of another person. I walked back to my car and undo my gas cap, and I get ready to fill it, when I start hearing yelling coming from the car next to me. I tried my best to ignore it, but it was kind of hard with where I was standing. I heard one guy yell about how much the other guy owed him, and then a woman started screaming something about how they were going to pay them back. I was just pretending to ignore it and pump the gas into my car, trying to make the 20 go as quickly as I could. Within a moment or two, I heard the group get out of the vehicle and continue their arguing, while one of the people went through the motions of trying to get the gas pumping in his car. They were yelling at each other non-stop, and the one guy was clearly getting frustrated with the reader, and for some reason unknown to me, my dumbass thought it would be a good idea to let him know that the reader wasn't working. I should have just minded my business and stayed out of it, but for some reason I leaned over and said, "Hey, the readers aren't working, you have to go in and pay him." The guy that was working with the pump, who was the guy that was screaming about how much the other 2 owed him, leaned over and actually thanked me as he walked toward the building. The other guy, the guy that was with the girl that both seemed to want to argue as much as they could, waited for the first guy to go into the station, and then looked at me and asked who the F I thought I was. I just kind of shook my head and said that I was just wanting to help. The reader wasn't working for me either. And the guy then stepped forward and pulled a switchblade from his pocket and pointed it at me. He then started talking about how he should, and this is a direct quote, skin my face so that he could feed his dog, and then ditch my body in the river so that they never find me. I just put my hands up and told him that I wasn't trying to cause trouble or anything. I honestly had no idea what to do. This guy was obviously flying off the handle over me helping. Within a few seconds, the knife was against my face, and this guy just kept staring at me with the craziest of eyes, telling me how much he was going to cut me up. Thankfully, the first guy came out of the station and asked what the hell he was doing, but in a much more forceful way. The guy with the knife started telling him that he was going to cut my throat and all the other stuff, but the first guy was apparently rather unhappy with this situation. He pulled a handgun from his waistline and pointed it at the guy with the knife. He then yelled at him to drop it before he dropped him. They went back and forth for a moment, but the knife guy eventually just gave up and got back in the car after yelling at me about how he would find me. I was literally just standing there and staring at the concrete with sweat dripping down my face, most likely visibly shaking in terror. After the knife guy got in the car, the first guy, the one with the gun, told me that he was sorry for his friend and that he was having withdrawal symptoms since he cut him off for not paying. I just kind of nodded and said that it was okay, and he actually seemed like he was sympathetic to the situation. Like, he was actually sorry. He told me that he wasn't going to do anything, and that I should probably just finish pumping my gas and go. I did what he said. I finished up, put it all back, and started getting in my car. Right before I left, he stopped me and said, "This is probably obvious, but I would appreciate it if you didn't tell the police about this. You know, for everyone's safety. I nodded again and told him that I wouldn't call the cops, and he told me to have a nice day. That was the last time I ever went to that station. I now only fill up near my house, and I never let my tank get empty to the point that I would have to go there. I also never saw those people again, thankfully, and I'm glad that the first guy was in the right mind to stop the one with the knife, because I feel like he was about to make very good on his threats. I have a weird story from when I used to work at a small gas station in a little town in Nebraska. I used to work the day shift, so for the most part, I got the normal people that were there to get snacks for the day or to just fill their tank during their lunch breaks or whatever. Sometimes we would get rowdy kids during the summer, but for the most part, it was an incredibly calm and straightforward job. The situation happened to me about 2 years ago in the middle of 2019. It was a pretty warm summer. The sun was beating down, and most of the people that we were getting were a bit irritable because of the heat, which was fine. I can deal with people that are in a bad mood. Around 2 in the afternoon, a lady comes into the store that seems a bit out of it. I think the best way to describe her respectfully would be she looked like she was on something that was making her very, very bouncy. Like an upper of some sort. But, as I say, to each their own, and you do you. She walked into the store looking around in every direction, kind of glancing to see if there was anyone else in the store, and her eyes were very wide open. As she walked in, she looked at me and smiled, and immediately walked to the front counter. I asked if I could help her, and she started talking super fast. She was saying things at me at a mile a minute about how hot it was, and how she needed to use the restroom, and then started talking about a dog. At first, I had no idea what she was saying, because I honestly could not keep up with her. I told her to take a breath, slow down, and then asked her what was wrong. She took a pause, did what I recommended, and then said, "It is really hot out there, and I need some water, but I don't want to leave my dog outside. Can I bring him in here?" I immediately wanted to say no, because we did technically serve food in the store on the rollers, so if it wasn't a service dog, it shouldn't be in the store. But then I kind of thought about it and told her that she could. There weren't any other customers in the store. She just needed water, so it was going to be quick, and to be honest, I really didn't care. She said thank you several times and then walked away from the counter, but she didn't go outside to get her dog. She started walking back to the drink cooler. I watched her walk to the back of the store like I thought she needed to bring her dog in. But at the same time, she wasn't all there, so I just let it go. After about 5 minutes, she came back up to the counter with 6 liter bottles of water and dropped them all on the counter. And she started thanking me again, saying how much she appreciated it. I started ringing up the water and then asked, "I thought you wanted to bring your dog inside. Why didn't you go get him?" And she stared at me confused. She then said, "What do you mean? I did bring him in." I paused and glanced over the counter and then around on the floor and asked where he was. She then unzips her purse and pulls out this small stuffed animal dog and starts telling me all the details about him. His name, where he was born, how much she bought him for from the breeder. She then starts telling me all about the memories that she has with him and how difficult it really was to raise him. Now, I don't know if I was clear about this, but this was a small, stuffed animal, not a real dog. It was small enough to fit in a purse. It had those plastic beady eyes like one of those Beanie Babies, and it was very clearly not real. As she's sitting there telling me all about her pet dog, she starts literally making a barking sound and thrusting the stuffed animal forward like it was alive. She then apologized and said that it was because he was moody because it was so hot, and that he was normally super sweet, and then started petting it and shoving it back into her purse. I just stared with a smile on my face, told her that it was a lovely dog, finished ringing her up, and told her her total. That was the whole experience, to be honest. I know that she wasn't all there, obviously, and it wasn't exactly creepy, but this was definitely a bit much for me. I guess if nothing else, her little stuffed dog was pretty cute, even if he was in a bad mood. I work at a small convenience store in a fairly small town in Kansas, and have been on the overnight shift for what feels like forever. It's typically pretty busy, and most of you in the Midwest would know the place if I told you the name. Just know it's the one that sells the mediocre pizza that hits differently in the middle of the night. Anyways, I've worked at this particular location for several years, and because I'm the only employee that doesn't have any children, I've had to pretty much work every single holiday we've been open, including Christmas, Independence Day, and, of course, Halloween. Honestly, I don't mind it. We typically aren't too busy on these days, but Halloween can be a bit of a hassle, because people like to walk in the store in full costume. This may not sound like a big deal, but people walking into a convenience store, a type of store that's well known for being robbed, with their face covered by a latex Freddy Krueger mask is definitely not ideal. Because of this, when people would enter wearing a mask, I would politely ask them to take them off while they were in the store. Most people were okay with the request, though there were the odd few that just ignored me and went on with getting their items. Annoying, sure, but there wasn't anything I could really do about it. The whole situation actually took place on Halloween, obviously. It was a fairly standard night with a good number of people coming in, mostly out of costume until around 8, when all the costumed people started coming in. Then, business overall just kind of tapered off around 9:30, and there were only a few people coming in to buy soda, energy drinks, and various mixers for their parties. As the night went on, most people that came into the store in costume were cool with it when I asked them to remove their masks. A few of them just walked past me and ignored my request, but again, nothing I could do to enforce the rules, so I just let it go and kept my eyes on them as best as I could. Then, sometime around 10, a group of people walked in, all in costume. There were a few college-aged girls, and a couple guys with them all talking rather loudly as they came in the door. They were all in costume, but only one of them had a mask that covered their face. It was a Jason Voorhees-style hockey mask, with a cloth on the back that covered the person's hair. And they were wearing the mechanic's jumpsuit. Of course, it was all covered in fake blood and painted to look dirty, and it did look good, but I was a bit nervous with the guy covering his face like that. As he walked by, I mentioned that I did like his costume, but I asked that he please remove his mask. Not to my surprise, he ignored me and walked back to the cooler section of the store. I shrugged it off, and I figured that since he was with a group of at least 4 other people, he wasn't likely to do anything stupid. I waited up at the register for them to finish up their browsing, and after about 5 minutes or so, The group of people came up to the register and bought an ungodly amount of Red Bull. I rang them up, they paid and left. Thankfully, it was a quick and painless transaction. It wasn't until they had gotten outside that I realized the group that had checked out were only the ones without their masks. Mr. Voorhees did not leave with them. This didn't quite rub me the right way, mostly because I had been banking on him being with the group of people as a justification for being okay with him covering his face in the first place. My first thought, and again, I was trying to rationalize it and make it okay in my head, was that he had just gone back to the restroom and was probably going to exit the store within a few minutes. Well, that few minutes passed and still no Voorhees. There was a certain level of nervousness about the situation. I wasn't keen on being stuck behind the register with this guy doing God knows what in the small section behind me, mostly because I couldn't see anything in the section where he went, which was a really bad design flaw to these stores. Sure, there were cameras, but having a blind spot in a store like this was a really bad idea. I decided that my best course of action was to go ahead and make sure this guy wasn't loading a bunch of soda into his pockets or something. Thankfully, I was out of water, so I had an excuse to walk away from the counter for a moment. So I stepped down from the raised area and took my cup back to the fountain to fill it. I slowly went around the corner towards the fountain and glanced over to the coolers. There was no one there. I walked over to the other side, and once again, nobody. I was confused, but I just accepted that it was possible that he had walked out at the side door, and I just didn't notice it at some point in time. I shrugged it off, and I went to fill my cup, and then I started my way back toward the register, which is the last thing I remember doing before waking up to a paramedic asking me if I could hear him. I was incredibly confused as to why I was staring at the ceiling of the store, why this guy was asking me if I knew what year it was, and why the hell the back of my head was in so much pain. As it was explained to me, and then also later shown to me on the security footage, walking over to the fountain was a terrible idea. Apparently, Mr. Voorhees had remained in the store and was looking for me to do something to leave me vulnerable. In the footage, this guy seriously crept around the corner when I was filling my cup, and when I turned away to go back to my register, he smacked me in the back of the head with some kind of club. This guy had a clean shot of me, and he took it, completely knocking me unconscious. What's worse, watching the footage, this guy did this for seemingly no reason. After I was knocked unconscious, he just stood over me and stared at me without moving for several moments, and then walked away. He didn't take a single thing from the store. He just attacked me and walked off. Even crazier, he was the one that actually called 911 from the payphone outside. From what I was told, he called them and told them that the person in the store was unconscious on the ground, and then hung up. From there, the paramedics arrived and, sure enough, found me on the floor. To the best of my knowledge, the guy was never found or arrested, and nobody has any idea why this happened. The thought of what he could have done scares the hell out of me, but I guess I'm glad that he was just looking to knock someone out for fun and not rob, or worse, murder somebody. This was also the last shift that I closed alone, and we now have 3 people that work the overnight shift on Halloween. When I was a teenager, I liked to bike places around our area, and while my parents always told me to be careful, they never really set a boundary on where I could or couldn't go. This typically meant that during the summers, when I was home with my friend Josh, We would ride around and go places further from home than we probably should have gone. There were a handful of places that we would just go to ride, but one of the places that we would ride to frequently was a local gas station. We would typically bike that way and buy candy, soda, Gatorade, just random things like that. Literally anything we could afford with our allowances. This gas station was more or less right in the middle of everything in our town. It was about a block away from a highway exit, but it was also across the street from a tow yard and less than a mile from residential areas. It was also on the edge of the town that most people would avoid, because it was filled with rentals that were basically drug houses. Even being 14, I was told about what they were. My parents decided that I needed to know about it all, so it was imprinted in my brain that I should avoid them. And I did. We never went that way. We stopped at the gas station and never went further in that direction. Unfortunately, that didn't always mean that we were able to avoid the people. There was one day that I remember very vividly, because it was one of the creepiest things that had happened to me up to that point in my life. Josh and I decided that we wanted to head up to the station, so we got on our bikes and made the trek at around 9 in the morning. We rode up to the station and started to walk over to the side of the building to park our bikes, as we always did. But as we started walking to the side, I told Josh to hold up, because I heard something. We both just stood there and listened, and sure enough, there was someone out back of the station that was singing. This alone is a bit weird, but not creepy. But it wasn't just the singing. The voice was feminine, but also really hoarse, like she needed to drink water really badly. She was singing a few lines from what I would guess was an old jazz song, but then after she would finish, like 2 of the lines, she would just start talking. And what she was saying really wouldn't make any sense. I remember exactly what she said that scared me. "I don't want to be in my skin anymore. It's too tight." Then, she started singing out the same 2 lines from earlier. She would sing the 2 lines, say something weird, and then start singing again. And that was enough to make me think that we should go ahead and just park in the front of the store and make our trip quick. In reality, we probably should have left, but we were 14 and I wasn't willing to abandon our mission. We went into the station and I immediately told the guy that was working there that there was some creepy lady singing out back. He didn't seem to care. My guess was that he saw us and thought that we were just 2 brats that were saying something stupid or making a joke about something. I shrugged and went to get my soda and candy, and then we got to the register and paid, basically making the transaction as quick as we possibly could. We finished up and stepped out of the store, and I noticed that Josh's bike wasn't where mine was. Then I looked over to the side and saw the lady that was singing. She was, to put it nicely, a mess. Her hair was a mess, and it looked like she had shaved small spots out of it, but not all of it. And she was wearing a tank top and a pair of underwear, and that was it. Her legs looked like they were cut up and dirty, and she was sitting on the ground with Josh's bike upside down on its handles. She had her hands on the pedals and was basically rotating them with her hands, and still singing that same song from earlier. We went over to her, and I mentioned that that was Josh's bike and that she needed to give it back. She looked at me and kept singing the lines, and then when she finished, she smiled and said, "It's my bike now." Now, obviously this woman was not all there, and she needed some serious mental help. And, in hindsight, I should have been nicer to her. Or we should have had the man in the station call the cops, or possibly an ambulance for her. But I was 14 years old, and I admit that I was an asshole. I will absolutely admit that. I grabbed the wheel of the bike to stop her from being able to move the pedals, and I pulled on the bike as hard as I could, while yelling that it was our bike and not hers. She jumped up, but then stared at me and then said, "Then take it." I pulled it and flipped it over, back to hand it to Josh, and she once again said, "Then take it." Then she stood up and started screaming at us. She started yelling, "Then take it. Take it before I decide to eat your skin off. Take it before I kill you." And she was yelling this over and over while standing up and walking toward us as we started to walk away. As we got on our bikes and started to pedal, she began running after us. And I feel like she was running at crazy speeds considering we were on bikes. The whole time she was screaming at us to leave before she killed us. And then she stopped and ended her whole episode with, "I will effing find you, Josh. I will find you and I'm going to take your skin." And then she let out a blood-chilling screech. Needless to say, we got home in record time, and we decided that we needed to not go back to that station anymore, and, well, we never did. That was literally the last time that we ever went there. I have no idea what happened to that lady or what she was on or what was wrong with her, but considering the location, I have to assume that she was probably on something. She also probably had other issues than just that. Like I mentioned before, I was a jerky teenager, and I hope that I can be forgiven for being the person I was. But at the time, I really had no understanding of these things, and this just scared the hell out of me. I do hope that she got help, sure, but I also hate that she ruined the thing that we had going for us. In the end, we got away, and it could have gone much worse, but it definitely still scared the both of us. So this was the collection of creepy gas station stories. A collection of stories involving gas stations, convenience stores, whatever you want to call them. Though gas stations, I believe, would just be stations without the convenience store. I guess convenience store is kind of the umbrella there, the cover-all name for these stores, whatever you want to call it. Gas station is better known and works better with the SEO stuff here. So, there you go. That's your gas station horror stories. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. If you diddly do, please consider hitting that thumbs up button. And if you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, minus the past 35 seconds, please ignore that. Consider subscribing to the channel. And if you would, please, consider leaving me a comment saying hi. Letting me know how things are going for you. Just telling me a vague story of your present situation. I might have jury duty next week. That sucks. Anyways, I hope you all have a beautiful day. No, let me go back over the other things here. Subscribing, commenting. You can also use thanks or super chats if I'm live. What am I even talking about at this point? Or join Patreon or memberships for early access to my content. I can't talk anymore, guys. I'm done. Screw it. You know what to do. You know what I'm saying at this point. I hope you all have a beautiful day. I hope I do see you on the next video, and that this did not deter you from staying around my channel. Until next time, friends. Sleep well.